So I heard a lot about this guy called Brandon Sanderson when I started reading more fantasy, and as a wannabe fantasy author who has just finished his manuscript and has a lot of more time to read more books, I kind of felt obligated to read his books, but I was also really curious about him. Then for my birthday I got The Way of Kings, which was my very first Sanderson book. I read it, I finished it. I'm gonna talk about that book also probably, but I also heard a lot about the Mistborn books. So I bought those books, at least the first trilogy of course, and I was really curious about them as well. And I really wanted to read them as this is kind of finished. I know there are more Mistborn books, but yeah, this trilogy is finished. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna read this one and I'll see from there. And I heard a lot of people talk about these Mistborn books in specific, talking about magic systems or character development. So I thought, I'm gonna read them. And I recently finished these books, all three of them, and I thought, I'm gonna talk about them for now. So Mistborn Era 1, or the first Mistborn trilogy, is divided into three books: The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. To me, it felt like one giant story. You could see each book as an act of a story. So most stories have like 3 acts. And to me, it felt like The Final Empire was Act 1, kind of the introduction and the build-up to a point where things are changing. And the second book, The Well of Ascension, felt like Act 2, where lots of things and other conflicts are introduced, and it's kind of building up to the third act, where everything is concluded and solved, and the questions from the very first act are answered in the third act. And that's The Hero of Ages. So I'm gonna talk about each of these books in different videos, and this video is going to be about The Final Empire. It's a video about how I feel about this book in particular, and each video will be divided into 2 sections. The first section will be a spoiler-free video, in case you are curious about these books, you have not read them, and you want to know what is it about, or why do I like these books, or would I recommend these books? The answer is yes, but why would I recommend them? Then there will be a giant spoiler warning, and I'm going to be talking about the same book filled with spoilers. So that's for the people who have read The Final Empire. Let's talk about The Final Empire without spoilers first. So the location is the city of Lutherdale, capital of The Final Empire. Roll credits. So that's it. What do you think about The Final Empire again? And the city of Lutherdale and the whole Final Empire is ruled by the Lord Ruler. And when I first heard about this, I thought, well, Lord Ruler, why not the Dark One, or the Dark Lord, or some other cliche? Give a hint about who is the bad guy here. And he is a bad guy. He's been ruling for 1,000 years. Imagine your head of state, or your prime minister, or your president ruling your country since the year 1020. That's insane. So the city of Lutherdale is divided into 2 classes, you could say. The lower class are the Ska people, and they are the lower class. They are poor, they are slaves, they have a very hard life on the streets, and basically no rights whatsoever. Then there's the nobility, so that's the upper class. So they are the rich people who live just under the reign of the Lord Ruler. They have their different houses, different families are there in Lutherdale, with all of them having different keeps where they reside. And they have these balls, and they drink and they laugh, and there's just the nobility. So there's kind of a class conflict in there. So the Lord Ruler is being portrayed as an all-powerful, godlike, immortal entity who changed the whole world, physically and economically and everything, who changed everything about the world 1,000 years ago. To indicate how powerful he is, he actually moved the planet, the position of the planet in relation to the sun. He created volcanoes. There is ash falling from the sky every day. He changed the whole culture. He banned religions. He changed everything to keep in power for 1,000 years. And nobody really knows where he comes from. Nobody really knows how he got this powerful, or who he actually is. And he also created allomancy. And allomancy has to do with the magic system in this world. And an allomancer, so someone who can use allomancy, is either a misting or a Mistborn. So that was the setting for now. So what is it about? We follow the protagonist, Vin. And she's a 16-year-old girl. She's a Ska girl who's had a very hard life. She lost her family basically. She still has memories of her brother. speaking to her in her head, in her thoughts. She lost her mother and her baby sister, and she knows who her father is, but he's not around or whatever. And she's joining a gang, a criminal gang in the underground, and it's a very tough life. And she doesn't trust anyone. She doesn't trust people because of her life on the streets and because of what her brother taught her. Her brother is nowhere to be seen as well, so she's very paranoid and very distrusting of people. Until one day, a guy called Kelsier comes around and says to her, I'm gonna save you from this criminal gang, and you're an Elementor, and I'm gonna train you. And Kelsier is a Mistborn, and he kind of saves Vin from the hard life that she's had. Vin is a great character because in the process of this book, of this story, and later on as well, she is being challenged to try to trust people, to make friends. And Kelsier brings her to a new found family, you could say. She gets to know people who are actually decent to her, who are nice to her, who don't mistreat her. But she still has the struggle of her brother's voice in her head of don't trust them, they're gonna leave you, they will lie to you, you have to lie back, you have to leave them before they can hurt you. So that's very interesting and very sympathizing character. Kelsier is going to teach her all about Elemency, as he's a Mistborn, and he says you can do Elemency as well. And this way we also get to know as a reader what the magic system is, what Elemency is, and it has to do with metals, literally metals like zinc or copper or iron or whatever. And when Vin learns about this, we as a reader learn about it as well. An Elementor can drink a vial that's containing metals, they actually consume it, they burn it as they call it, in their stomach or something. I don't really know the biology, but that doesn't really matter. They burn it, and then it gives them very specific powers. They can push and pull metal, they can push and pull on people's emotions, trying to make them feel differently. They can strengthen their physical power. They can also strengthen their senses, all these different kinds of powers. There are very distinct rules. If you use this metal, you can do that. If you use that metal, you can do this. And these metals form pairs. They do the opposite of each other. Or these metals are very physical, or these metals are more emotional. I gotta say, it kind of felt like an info dump sometimes during these lessons of Kelsier and Vin. But it's quite important to know, and it's not that hard to remember or to understand. It's quite logical, and it really pays off in the bigger action scenes later on when they're actually using their Elemency powers. But wait, you might say, why did Kelsier save Vin from the streets? Well, Kelsier saved Vin from the streets not only to train her, but also because he wants her to join his crew, as he's trying to pull a Ocean's 11 on the Lord Ruler. Not even kidding, Sanderson actually really watched the movie in depth to know how to make a heist movie, because Kelsier is gonna pull a heist. Yeah, it feels kind of unbelievable. So you're gonna defy this all-immortal being who's been ruling for 1,000 years, and you're just a guy, a Mistborn guy, and who's been planning something for years with this crew, with different people, with different elements as well, and you're gonna pull a heist on the Lord Ruler. So it's not like the Scar never tried anything in those 1,000 years. There were rebellions, there were uprisings, but they were all in vain, and so far the Lord Ruler never even felt threatened by them. And it's quite hard to do because nobody really knows who he is. There are legends about the so-called Hero of Ages, who was supposed to be the chosen one, was supposed to save the world from the so-called deepness, but he failed. And now they're stuck with this Lord Ruler for 1,000 years, and nobody knows who he is or where it came from. So the last part I'm gonna say, without spoiling anything, because these are all just introductions to this book. What Vin eventually does is she's gonna spy on the nobility houses. As a street urchin, she has to change in a noble woman called Vanette Renou. And in my head, it always sounded French for some reason, because I didn't really know what the English pronunciation would be of Renou. Renux seems legit. Well, I'm gonna say Vanette Renou anyway. And she actually has to spy on the nobility houses. So she's going to different balls and trying to interact with these people. And in the house Venture, in Keep Venture, she meets Eland Venture. I didn't like Eland that much at all at first. He's a kind of a nerdy guy, kind of a geeky guy, but yeah, he's fine. That's all I'm gonna say about it. Why should you read The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson? Because I think it's quite easy to follow, it's quite easy to understand. Also, when you have never read a fantasy novel whatsoever, if you're really new to all the fantasy, or you like fantasy movies or series, and books are so thick and there's a lot of information and there's a lot of descriptions and it takes forever to get to somewhere. Brandon Sanderson doesn't do that. The pacing is quite fast, it's quite easy to follow. and the magic is very logical. The characters are very good as well, especially Vin and Kelsier are very easy to sympathize with. Some other characters are more like background people. Also, Sanderson isn't that shy of gruesome events. There's blood, there's killing, there are creatures walking around in the mist that will haunt your nightmares if you ever saw something like this in real life. And there are actual people with iron spikes in their heads, right through their skull, and they walk around with these things instead of their eyes. So that's why I recommend reading this book. And now I'm going to talk about the spoilers. So now starts the spoiler section. So if you have not read The Final Empire of the first Mistborn trilogy of Brandon Sanderson, go buy this book at your local bookstore or order it at your local bookstore. Read it, come back here, and now you're in the future. Now we're going to talk about spoilers for The Final Empire. So this is only for people who have read The Final Empire. So what I like most about this book, and actually the whole series, is that everything stands and falls with the whole magic system. So this book is mostly about Allomancy, as Kelsier is teaching Vin everything about Allomancy. But there's also another part of the magic system which is called Ferrochemy. Ferrochemy is the opposite of Allomancy. In Allomancy, people use the metals as a fuel to gain specific powers. In Ferrochemy, the metal mines, in other words, the metal bracelets they wear and that have to touch their skin, they store the specific powers of Ferrochemy. So the body is the fuel here. So the Lord Ruler, called Rashek, was first and foremost a terrorist man and a ferrochemist. And when he took the power from the Well of Ascension, he became an Allomancer or a Mistborn. I told you there was going to be spoilers, and especially the hard magic pays off because it would otherwise be very difficult to justify the fall of an immortal, godlike, powerful being that's been ruling for 1,000 years, being killed by a ex-street urchin. It would be very hard to justify this. You would feel like, oh yeah, of course he's been ruling for 1,000 years, there have been uprising by Scar people, but they all failed, and now there's suddenly this girl from the streets who's been training Allomancy for a couple of months and kills him. Sure, bunch of losers those Scar people were, am I right? That's not the case, at least that's how I felt. Maybe you felt like this, but to me, there were very specific rules about what had to be done to kill the Lord Ruler, or how to identify the Lord Ruler. And it's quite fortunate that Kelsier, as a living being, already had a legendary status as the survivor of the Hudson pits. When you finish the book and looking back at what he's been doing during the whole book, he kind of deliberately acted as a kind of a Jesus-like figure, meeting the Scar people, helping them, talking to them, trying to be a hero to them, and they actually really trusted him and looked up to him. Because of this, Kelsier could really, like he did, he pulled a heist on his crew. And just like in the Ocean's 11, spoilers there maybe a bit, Kelsier wanted to pull a heist on the Lord Ruler, wanted to overthrow the Lord Ruler with his crew, but he also pulled a personal heist on his crew. And his plan included the Kandra or Cesar, and the 11th metal, and his public death. The 11th metal that Kelsier has been talking about through the whole book, and everybody or more people keep thinking, well, does it really exist though? And he keeps saying it does exist. And the 11th metal is Malassium, and the power it gives an Allomancer is to see the past of other people. And Vin uses the 11th metal to identify the Lord Ruler. Because when she uses the metal, she sees the Lord Ruler, and there's a terrorist man next to him, which is Rashek, which is what the Lord Ruler used to be. And then she learns he's a ferrochemist. And when the Lord Ruler dies, or shortly before he's definitely killed, I really liked his warning about what they had done. About, you have no idea what you're doing. Something like that, he says. And I really like that fact, because this whole book is so focused on killing the Lord Ruler and ending the suppression of the Scar people. Of course, you know it's a trilogy, so there's going to be 2 more books, but when the Lord Ruler is dead, you know, okay, there's going to be big consequences here. One of my favorite scenes is when Vin sees the physical Lord Ruler for the first time. I believe that she and Kelsier and the crew are from a distance watching at a square where lots of people are gathered, and the Lord Ruler is arriving. And before his vessel is even there in sight, or he himself is in sight, she feels his power, and she feels his allomantic soothing, I believe it was soothing, through the whole crowd, and she immediately believes, well, my God, this man is so powerful, as she herself is already growing to become a more and more powerful elemental, so she actually knows what it means to have that kind of power as an elemental. And then she immediately understands this guy is so powerful, and realizes what a godlike figure it is. When he appears on the square, he's just a guy, and he's just human. He looks like a normal guy, and she can hardly believe, well, is this the guy we're fighting against? Is this the guy we're trying to kill? Another thing I like very much is the relationship between Vin and Kelsier. It kind of reminded me about the game The Last of Us, where there's also a kind of found father and found daughter relationship. And Vin, of course, as a very family-less street urchin, meets Kelsier and his crew, and there's a very obvious found family trope in there. And that's very nice to see their interactions and their lessons, but they don't only talk about Elemency or the mission they have, but also about other things. There's, for example, a picture of a flower that Kelsier shows Vin, which is basically Kelsier's motivation to do all of this. Kelsier lost his wife, Mare, killed by, I think, the Lord Ruler or one of his inquisitors, I don't quite remember anymore. But this picture is, he says, what he fights for, because of all the ash around. The plants are not green at all. There are no bright colors of flowers anywhere. And he says that the world could be like this again. And that makes for Kelsier a very powerful character, because he has a very strong motivation to reach this goal. He's even willing to die for it and to help other people reach the goal as well. And this picture resonates with Vin so good, as she can hardly believe, or really, is this what the world could be like? She can hardly believe it. And yeah, Kelsier kind of hates the nobility. He's all the hero for the Scar people and against the suppression of Scar people, and therefore he hates the nobility. And as Vin is spying as Vinette Renou between the nobility houses and getting relationships kind of between there and getting to know these people, she is the one who challenges Kelsier into thinking, no, they're also just human beings. They are also just born in this system of nobility. And because Vin also learns from Eland Venture that the nobility actually mistreats their children to make them snap. And when they snap, they can either be missing or misborn. And the nobility wants as much misborn children as possible, because it makes them more powerful. So in every family, the children, both who didn't become misborn and both who are misborn, were treated very badly, mistreated as well. Vin is learning this side of the nobility as well, and is trying to talk about this to Kelsier as well. And it actually works, because at the big fight, when right before Kelsier actually dies at the hands of the Lord Ruler, when he kills the Inquisitor in the square and there's chaos everywhere, Eland Venture meets him there because he's looking for Vin. But at that point, Kelsier knows from Vin who Eland is and how she feels about him and how he feels about her. And because he's nobility, Kelsier doesn't let his hate for the noble people get in the way, and he tells Eland where she is, and he actually saves Eland's life at that point as well. So that shows a bit of his character of Kelsier as well. What's also kind of ironic, I thought, is that because Vin has very much trouble trusting people, as her brother Reen is saying inside her thoughts and her head. And then Vin kind of slowly learns to trust Kelsier and other people as well, and even the Eland Venture. Well, she is a spy. So she's the one who cannot be trusted by the nobility. So she's pretending to be something else or someone else when she came for a very harsh environment. Another favorite character of mine is Cesar, or Cesar, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. He's a ferrochemist, very good. I think I said that right. I really liked him as well, with this seemingly endless knowledge about religion most of all, and his will to the role he plays in the whole crew. So the crew are all these kind of bad guys. Well, they're not really bad guys, but some of them are. And he's more like a more humble scholar type person who really plays an important role in the whole series, basically. And also he's such a powerful ferrochemist. And if I had to choose personally between Elemency or Ferrochemy, I think I would choose for Ferrochemy. Definitely not choose Hammerlurgy, not at all. But Ferrochemy, I think that would be my favorite kind of magic to have. So what did I not like about The Final Empire? Well, first of all, as I already mentioned, there's kind of the info dumps at the beginning about the magic system. When Kelsier tells Vin about the Elemency first time, also when Cesar tells her about Feruchemy, what that actually means. It's all important and it's all nice to know, and I don't think at all it's a bad magic system, but it kind of feels like an info dump at sometimes. And but it's all very logical and not quite difficult to remember, and it really pays off in the action scenes. So that's a very minor thing that I think is the bit of the disadvantage of having a hard magic system. You have to explain it very thoroughly as a writer. The second thing is more about Sanderson's writing style. I can see why he's a popular writer at this point because of many things, his character development, his magic system, his world building, and his writing is very direct and it's very high paced, and that could be a good thing, you know. But on the other hand, me personally, I also really like it when there's time to look around the room and see what it looks like, or someone's clothing, or the environment of the city, what type of buildings are there. There's not very much of that in The Final Empire, and also not in the rest of the books. And I think I know this kind of Sanderson's writing style to not have that much prose. Other than that, I really like his writing style. I really enjoy his books, of course. For me personally, it's something I would like to read. That also brings me to my third point of critique. Because of the lack of the descriptions of the environment or whatever, combined with high pacing, it makes for a feeling of there's always something going on, and now this is happening, and now that is happening, now this changes, and now that's something new, and that makes for a kind of lack of rest for me. Like, the characters there are not many moments where characters do nothing, and you don't want them too much, of course, because that would be quite boring to read, but there are moments that Vin and Kelsier are just talking about things, or just thinking about things. Everything is happening to push the story forward, and that's good in a way. Also really like the characters to just walk around and enjoy their day for a bit while doing nothing really special, but just for their character, because they as a character like to do that, and not because the story wants them to do that. But those are very small, some things I personally like to see, or were personal critique points of me about this book. Other than that, I would rate it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Because I really enjoyed this book. When after you finish it, you're really wondering, okay, where does it go from here? What's happening next? Now that the Lord Ruler is dead, their one goal they were trying to achieve, they accomplished, and where does it go from here? That's my review about The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. What are your thoughts on this book? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What do you think of the magic system, of the characters, of the world building? Do you agree with the things I said? Do you disagree? Just let me know at the comments here below. Give a like if you like this video, and I'm gonna be reviewing The Well of Ascension and The Hero of Ages as well, of course. If you want to see more of my reviews or more videos made by me, you can subscribe, of course, to my channel. You can also follow me on social media. You can find the links in the description. Have fun reading!